The Indo-Pacific has become the most dangerous chessboard in the world. But now, its ripple effects are crashing straight into Europe. Germany's foreign minister has sounded the alarm, warning that tensions thousands of miles away between China, Taiwan, and rival powers in the South China Sea could soon shake the very foundations of Europe's economy, its trade routes, and even its security. This is no longer Asia's problem alone. The storm in the Pacific is blowing westward, and Europe may be the next front line. Welcome to Shadows of Strategy, where we break down the battles, alliances, and power plays shaping our world today. At first glance, the Indo-Pacific might seem far from Europe's borders. But for nations like Germany, France, and the Netherlands, what happens in the Taiwan Strait or the South China Sea is no longer just a regional dispute. It's a direct threat to their national interests. Consider this. Nearly 40% of European trade flows through the Indo-Pacific's shipping lanes. A single blockade in the Taiwan Strait or a naval clash in the South China Sea could choke off supply chains, stall manufacturing, and trigger an economic crisis across the continent. For countries still recovering from energy shocks after the war in Ukraine, that's an unbearable risk. This is why Germany's foreign minister recently declared that Europe must prepare for instability in Asia, not as an observer, but as a stakeholder. Berlin has already deployed naval vessels to the region in joint drills with Japan, Australia, and the United States. A symbolic but significant shift for a country that traditionally avoided such far-reaching military commitments. France, too, has boosted its naval presence, reminding the world that it is not just a European power, but also an Indo-Pacific one, with territories and citizens in the region. Why is Europe suddenly so concerned? Because the Indo-Pacific is not just about islands and fishing rights. It's about the global balance of power. China's rapid military expansion, its assertiveness in the South China Sea, and its threats toward Taiwan are being closely watched by European capitals. If Beijing were to move aggressively, it would set a precedent for great powers redrawing borders by force. That is exactly what Europe fears after witnessing Russia's invasion of Ukraine. A Chinese takeover of Taiwan would not only shatter regional stability, it would embolden other revisionist powers, creating a chain reaction across Eurasia. In Brussels, NATO has already labeled China a systemic challenge for the first time in its history. The alliance is openly considering how to prepare for threats beyond its immediate geography. British warships are making regular patrols in the Pacific, while Germany and the Netherlands are investing in Indo-Pacific strategy papers that tie their security to Asia's future. Europe is realizing that strategic autonomy cannot exist in isolation. It is tied to the maritime highways that connect factories in Asia to consumers in Europe. But here's the dilemma. Europe is still economically tied to China. German car makers, French luxury brands, and European tech firms rely heavily on Chinese markets. Any attempt to decouple or to impose sanctions in the event of a Taiwan crisis would hit Europe just as hard as it would hit Beijing. Policymakers in Berlin and Paris are walking a tightrope, balancing between defending the rules-based order and preserving economic lifelines. The warning from Germany's foreign minister wasn't just rhetoric. It reflects a growing fear that Europe is sleepwalking into another strategic trap. The European Union is already strained by the war in Ukraine, rising defense budgets, and political fragmentation at home. If it gets pulled into a confrontation in the Indo-Pacific, it could face a two-front challenge, containing Russia in the west and deterring China in the east. That would be a nightmare scenario for European leaders. Meanwhile, the United States is pushing its allies to step up. Washington has made it clear that if a Taiwan conflict erupts, Europe cannot remain neutral. American officials are urging NATO members to prepare sanctions, military support, and coordinated responses. Essentially the same playbook used against Russia, but this time aimed at Beijing. Some European leaders agree, but others hesitate. Countries like Hungary and Greece, heavily invested in China's Belt and Road projects, are reluctant to take a hard line. Even within Germany, business lobbies are warning against antagonizing Beijing too much. The result is a divided Europe, caught between strategic necessity and economic dependency. China, for its part, is watching Europe closely. Beijing knows that a united Western front could complicate its calculations on Taiwan. This is why China has been investing heavily in Europe's infrastructure and trade partnerships, hoping to prevent a unified stance. At the same time, it uses coercive tactics, such as threatening European companies with market restrictions if they align too closely with US policies. For Beijing, Europe is not just a trading partner, it is a battlefield for influence. The Indo-Pacific is also drawing in Europe militarily in ways unseen before. The United Kingdom's aircraft carrier strike groups have sailed through contested waters, and France has pledged to increase its patrols near the South China Sea. Germany has announced plans to send more frigates to the region. Despite domestic debates about overstretching its forces, these moves may seem small compared to US firepower, but symbolically, they mark a huge shift. Europe is projecting power in Asia, preparing for a role in what could be the defining conflict of the century. Yet the risks are profound. If Europe aligns too strongly with the US against China, it risks economic retaliation. If it hesitates, it risks losing credibility with allies in Asia who depend on Western support. The debate raging in European capitals reflects this uncertainty. Should Europe be a global power ready to defend the Indo-Pacific? Or should it focus inward, securing its own borders and leaving Asia to the Americans? There is no easy answer. What is clear is that the Indo-Pacific is no longer far away. The choke points of the Taiwan Strait and the South China Sea are as critical to Europe's survival as the North Sea or the Mediterranean. The war in Ukraine proved how quickly a regional crisis can ripple across the globe. The next great test may come from Asia, and Europe will not be able to stand aside. For now, Europe watches the waves in the Pacific with growing anxiety. Its ships sail alongside allies, its diplomats prepare contingency plans, and its industries quietly brace for disruption. Whether it admits it or not, Europe is already part of the Indo-Pacific conflict. The only question left is whether it will be ready when the storm truly breaks.